Welcome back to Neighboring. This is a series of interviews where we explore what it means to be a good neighbor. We invite friends, family members, coworkers, people we haven't even met yet, and really ask this question: what does it mean to be a good neighbor? And today I'm with Ewelina with Amani Family Services, and she's gonna tell us a little bit about her story. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, well, I'm really excited to speak with you today and share and hear some of your story. Please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about Amani, and tell us some of your story.
Yes, my name is Ewelina Connolly, and I am Polish-born. I've been in this country for about 20 years, which is about half of my life. I found my way to Amani originally as a therapist, and returned to Amani last November in a new role as a clinical director. I oversee the clinical operations.
All right, tell us a little bit of what does Amani do?
Yes, Amani Family Services is a social service agency here in town, and very much like every other social agency, we render services to clients who might be in need of counseling, therapy, treatment options for various mental health concerns. Unlike all the other agencies in town, our vision and mission focuses on refugee and immigrants. We partner with those families to help them navigate the resources and allow them access to resources.
That's great.
Yeah.
How long has Amani been around?
That's over a decade now.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, one of the things, a part of the series, is we're really just trying to explore this context of what does it mean to be a good neighbor. We have our own, as Americans, we have our own understanding of that. Part of my curiosity as creating this series is curious about, I've done some international travel, I've interacted with various immigrant and refugee communities, and almost every time I just sense this warmth and deep relational connectivity from complete strangers. And so I'm curious, in the context of this series, like really wanting to explore, like, what does neighboring look like for individuals that are from a different place, grew up in a different culture, different context, and then what it's like to even come to the United States and trying to assimilate and connect and try to find good neighbors and be relational. And so I'm really curious to hear about your story. What is your understanding of neighboring and being a good neighbor from your time in Poland?
Yeah, so that's a really loaded question.
Yes, help me try to take a very generalized, big picture view into a very micro, personal experience for us. Because
Yes.
like we've talked before, like it's one thing to have a very macro, big picture perspective, and it's a completely different thing when you get relational and personal. So tell us your story.
Certainly. Well, coming from Poland, I grew up in what I would refer to as collectivist culture. We're very people-oriented. And I think in your question, or maybe what you were referring to in general, refugees, immigrants, a lot of those individuals are coming from collectivist cultures. So relationships mean a lot to us. This is a way of living. And neighborhoods are really our microcosms of how we exist and how we learn about the bigger world. Our neighbors are often the sources of our biggest strengths and support. And so this is the kind of mentality that I grew up with. To me, being a neighbor means being connected, being able to share in joys and sorrows, and share resources, access to resources as well. Now to maybe tap into the second part of your question of how was that experience for me in comparison to coming here?
Yeah. What is, explain, you mentioned like a collectivist culture, community. Give us some more context for that. What does that really mean to somebody that may not have? That's a new term.
Yeah, sure.
Unless you've thought about it.
So it's really, the focus is not necessarily on yourself, but is on yourself as a part of a community. And that's the way of thinking. I don't look at myself as an individual who can be fully self-sufficient. My goal in life is not to be independent. I am looking to exist in a context of supportive community where I can coexist and be interdependent. So offer the strengths and resources that I have, but also have the benefit of reaching out for the strengths and resources in somebody else.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so back to your own kind of story and like how you grew up and.
So again, I grew up in a culture where we're very connected and very close, to the point that as a teenager I felt a little crowded. I felt that there are a lot of people that knew a lot of things about me, and literally as a child on the playground, if I was out of line, it was absolutely appropriate for somebody else's parent to come and smack me on the butt if I was not behaving. That was socially acceptable. That was something that actually parents expected of one another, that there's always going to be eyes and ears, even though they are not physically present, somebody else would be watching over their kids and making decisions, for their well-being. So as a teenager, of course, that didn't work out very well for me, and I wanted to be independent, and I wanted to break away from that. And coming to America was just the perfect opportunity to start anew. And the interesting thing about it was that the minute I arrived here and found myself in this new reality, the community, it was what I immediately started to long for.
Wow.
Yeah. And then since coming here 20 years ago, I feel I spend every waking moment of my time trying to build that for myself and my children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So from there, so you've been here for about 20 years, and you transitioned into the United States and into this community. What was the kind of the transition? How did you get established? How did you eventually kind of reconnect with community, or like, what was that process to come to a new place, to try to find work, to try to find friends, a new sense of family on a day-to-day basis? What was that transition kind of like for you?
It was detrimental for me. It has very much impacted the way I think and live today. When I say coming to America, I really have to specify coming to Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Okay, yeah.
And the reason I want to point it out is that when we talk about sense of community and connectedness, we have to think about ways to connect with people. Well, transportation is not our strength here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So I found myself living on the outskirts of the city,
okay,
and not having driver's license yet, not speaking the language. So my opportunities to connect were very limited. It took a few years to be able to find my ways, go back to school and learn the language. I found that one way to connect is to establish common communication. And language is everything. Language is doesn't only give you the ability to communicate what you want to say, but to also understand the culture. As you know, language doesn't also exist, just words are meaningless without the context of culture. And so through learning language, I was able to learn more about the American culture as well, and look for those points of, connection that I could make. Yeah.
That's great. So you, if I remember right, from a previous conversation we had, you had done some university before you came, right? Mm-hmm. And you transitioned to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and it didn't quite transfer, right?
Not quite.
Okay.
No.
So you almost had to restart and start college again and kind of start from scratch.
Well,
to an extent?
I look at it as I had the opportunity to
Yeah.
actually go to school and do something that I was passionate about doing, something that was not a part of my reality, living in post-communist Poland, where the degree that I had to choose had to be reasonable.
Yeah.
And, I had to make sure that it would be something that would offer, fair compensation so I can support myself as an adult. So I had, again, the privilege to be able to choose a program, an area of study that was close to my heart. But it wasn't an easy process. As I mentioned, it took me a few years to learn the language, to be able to achieve the proficiency, so I could write the papers and take the exams.
Sure.
Here in America, we love the multiple choice tests, and that's a skill that I had to learn because I come from a world of writing essays.
Okay.
And, that was one of the major skills that I had to learn.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So your personal experiences, your professional pursuits, and your desires, have led you to the role that you're at now. And I'm sure there's lots of steps in between there in the last 20 years. But fast forwarding into your current role as the clinical director at Amani, tell us a little bit about some of the other families and individuals that are coming to Fort Wayne and trying to go through a similar process you had. Like, give us a snapshot of that process maybe in Fort Wayne today.
Yes. Again, it's a broad question. I'll try to answer best
Sure.
I can, and based on
Feel
the
free to
experiences.
give a couple of examples.
Based on the experiences that have been shared with me through our clients and families that we serve. A lot of it I can absolutely imagine and relate to. Being an immigrant myself, even though the experiences, maybe the motivation in coming to America were different, but the experience of having to come and go through the process of acculturation are very much the same. It's something that I can easily relate to. It's definitely a common ground. We have so many different groups of people here in Fort Wayne. We have refugees, we have immigrants. Just thinking of their immigration status informs you a little bit or a lot as to their process of how they have come to live here. And that's a very important piece because that will also inform you as to what are some things that they may need to integrate to this community and live successful, productive lives.
So I've already made a couple of generalizations and just trying to facilitate this conversation, which is really great and very challenging. And you've been very gracious at it depends. Let's dive a little bit more into that, which gets at is kind of the next string of questions and the challenges. So there's individuals like myself and various communities that really want to try to know. We want to try to cross the threshold. We want to be relationally engaging and trying to get to know folks. And so, but that's a scary and unfamiliar place for a lot of folks. We haven't been taught how to do that. You've probably experienced our communities in the United States can be very homogenous. We go and we move and we target based on a lot of what we look like. We don't necessarily choose a lot of diverse environments that gives us that kind of daily routine of having our worldviews broadened due to diverse relationships. So help me and help us maybe approach this from what kind of advice would you give folks that are really trying to be more aware and more engaging and connective? What are some ideas and steps that we could take to make that process less awkward, less challenging, and more beneficial for us all?
I love that question. I really do. And I think I may have a good answer for you for this one.
Okay.
I don't think it's just getting to know people that are visibly, markedly different than us, but people in general. We are all very different. And I would like to propose that attitude of curiosity where you are asking somebody to let you learn about them without jumping into your assumptions and prejudice and, you know, maybe what you've been taught. A lot of those barriers to wanting to be around people different than us come from some of the stereotypes that are, you know, so ingrained, embedded in our cultures. And it's not just American culture. Every culture has their own prejudice against other cultures.
Yeah.
So we all, as humankind, we are against the same challenge, no matter what country you live and what race you are. And again, being able to approach new people as, you know, with the attitude of curiosity and wanting to learn is probably the best way. It'll help you really capitalize on the opportunity to get to know a person without maybe putting barriers in place based on presumptuous, you know, thoughts or prejudice. So I would say, I don't know that I have one fix for all, but I would say just being open to new encounters and being open to hearing and learning and taking one down and saying, I don't know, can you tell me? Can you teach me about this? People tend to be more gracious that way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a great answer. Very insightful on the idea that, you know what, this is just a people thing to an extent. Like, what is the natural curiosity driving it? And we don't have to, it doesn't have to be as big and broad or even as overwhelming as we think about it, but if we become more curious about the people we're around on a regular basis, and even at times like choose to put yourself in places.
Right, and it's a two-way street, you know. Here I am from Poland, you're trying to learn about me, I'm trying to learn about you.
Sure.
You know, we're, you know, learning simultaneously about each other's cultures. And if I was to walk into this conversation thinking you were a typical American, right, and had all these thoughts that I've been fed over the years of what it means to be a typical American, I probably would miss out on a lot of, you know, wonderful qualities that you do have, or, you know, stories about you that I could never learn.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that really for the last kind of 20 years or so, you've been trying to kind of almost recreate and are constantly working on a daily basis to kind of rebuild the first 20 years of your life or more, this idea of this collective culture and community in your family and your neighborhoods. How's that going?
It's going great.
Okay.
It's going great. I'm pretty sure my mom is not going to be an audience to this show, but if she did, she would be so darn proud of me.
That's great. What are some ways that looks like? What are some forms that's taking place?
You know, there's so many things that you can do as an individual to build a community. And one of the things that was important to me when living in Fort Wayne is finding a place that I belong. I think belonging is, you know, a quest that we're all on. We want to belong in some way. So for me, it started with finding the type of neighborhood, the type of surroundings that I felt comfortable with. And so that was a step. And then finding ways to connect and finding ways to give to that community. So not only you know, sitting in my home and waiting for opportunities to knock on my door and people wanting to get to know me, just being able to go out there and see what are some things that I can do, what are some assets, resources that I bring, you know, to that community that I can share.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it mean with your work at Amani? I think is very interesting. What does it look like, or how would you respond to this idea? What does it look like to advocate for someone else? Like this role of advocacy in our society, no matter really what the background is, but I think you guys have some really unique perspective on this idea of what does it mean to really advocate for something or someone else?
Right. From the very start, the way we think about the families that we work with, you know, we tend to think life is a journey for all of us. And it's always good to have a good fellow traveler go alongside you. And sometimes that fellow traveler may offer you information that you need to navigate the new terrain, new territory. And that's kind of how we see our role. We don't necessarily serve, we partner with our families, and we're a resource to them. I hope that this is answering your question, but it's our philosophy. Also, you've mentioned how intimidating can be to interact with people that are very different than you are. We see our role in helping people maybe take the next step in their cultural competency. So we'll offer trainings to the community, we'll offer trainings to the providers to answer some questions. We all are generally afraid of the unknown and different.
Sure.
And again, that's a humankind thing, that's not a specific person thing. And so being able to address those hesitations and being able to open a dialogue with the community where we can find opportunities for our families to connect and integrate and thrive.
Yeah, you talked about this idea of cultural competency and really needing to develop that. And what I'm picking up and really trying to gather here is like that's commitment, that's intentionality. There's this, proximity plays a huge part in this. And how are you putting yourself in places and choosing places that really put you in close proximity with others, and wade into the discomfort or the unknowns or the mess of it and stay long enough that you can become changed and really growing in those areas. To wrap up here, number one, I'm curious, what does it mean to be a good neighbor from your perspective? From you personally.
For me personally, is somebody that you can come over unannounced, that you can stop by and pick up a cup and borrow a cup of flour, that you can stop by and share maybe or access of produce that you overbought at the farmer's market and you don't want it to go to waste. That you say hello, that you start a conversation, that you care.
Yeah. From a person that comes from and works with a lot of cultures or a lot of individuals from this collective cultural background, what are ways that someone like myself that hasn't, some general ways of what does it mean then to be a good neighbor? What are some things that we could learn about that you see most present in those kind of cultures for someone that hasn't necessarily grown up or experienced that?
Yes, it is going to start with curiosity. You can go to any of the ethnic food stores and browse and learn more about that.
That's great.
About the food that they make. Food is huge. For most collectivist cultures, food is the center of interaction. Big shout out to my colleague and friend Mandeep, who has brought a delicious lunch for everybody today at work. An opportunity to gather and do some productive thinking and strategizing, but also opportunity to connect. So food is great. If you have opportunity to attend any cultural events, we have so many of them in Fort Wayne. We're so very lucky. And if you actually go, you experience that hospitality. They'll never make you feel as you don't belong. They'll make you a part of it right away. And that's true for most of, at least the experiences that I've had. Because on the outside, I also look as pretty typical average person. So when I go into a setting to interact with the Burmese culture, or, they don't see me as also culturally different other than probably what they would refer to as mainstream. And I've always had wonderful experiences. I think being a good neighbor is really taking interest in getting to know people, connecting with them.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for wading into this conversation with me and having a tremendous amount of grace for myself. And now we're neighbors, and we can move forward in that space. Thanks for your work at Amani and for doing your best to try to, wherever you're at, create community and pull people in. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for joining this week's episode of Neighboring. I hope that you, like myself, will take some time to go to the grocery store, catch the next event where we can be present and begin to learn by, one, building new friendships cross-culturally with our neighbors who have so much to offer, and we have so much to offer them as well. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you the next time.